The modern economic malaise in the United States is captured by two numbers. The first is the decline in average family income, which has slid for the past 3 years and now stands at the same level, adjusted for inflation, that it was in 1996. The second is the persistent level of unemployment at 9.1%, up from 7.8% when Barack Obama took office. In answer to these numbers, two competing populist movements have emerged. On one hand, the largely conservative Tea Parties, which began in 2009, and on the other, the largely progressive Occupy Wall Street protests that are going on now. These two movements represent two truly competing worldviews: the classical liberalism of America's founding period and the modern progressivism that served as the foundation of Roosevelt's New Deal. There's no middle ground between the two. The first component in a system based on classical liberalism is the call for limited government, funded by tax revenues preferably generated under a flat tax, i.e., one that requires uniform rates for the taxable individuals, regardless of their aggregate income in any given tax period. The sole purpose of this taxation is to fund the creation of essential public goods that could not be created or maintained without some system of coerced public support, like a strong national defense. Such a flat tax is designed to benefit all individuals taxed, regardless of their wealth. Government borrowing to meet the cost of capital improvements is generally acceptable, but borrowing to pay for short-term consumption items is not. In other words, it's proper to use borrowed funds to create long-term capital investments like the interstate highway system, but not to fund short-term government activity like paying of salaries for public employees. Now, the second component of the classical liberal system draws on traditional libertarian theory insofar as it relies on a system of strong property rights that allow individuals choice on how to use and dispose of their property so long as they do not encroach on the land of their neighbors or create nuisances. The third component of the overall system requires a strong commitment to the principle of freedom of contract. Now, essentially, individuals and corporations should be free to enter into relationships without government regulations. This means that the terms and conditions of individual employment contracts should be decided by employers and employees, operating within the general confines of a competitive market. Such contracts should be left untouched by minimum wage and anti-discrimination laws. People can freely organize into labor unions, but those unions should not be exempt from antitrust laws and should be afforded no special legal privileges. Each of these three pillars of classical liberalism, the flat tax, strong property rights, and free markets, is systematically rejected in the progressive agenda. Now, for progressives, any notion of limited government at either the federal or state level is regarded as a misguided holdover from a simpler economic era that has long vanished from view with the industrialization of the post-Civil War period. Progressivism advocates for a progressive tax, where some pay a higher rate while others pay a lower one, or in many cases, even nothing at all. It sees an acceptable purpose for taxation beyond providing essential public goods, specifically arranging a set of wealth transfers from rich to poor. For progressives, taxation would be necessary and appropriate even if all goods and services were otherwise paid for. And by the same token, government interference in private business relationships is, according to progressives, regarded as an essential government function in order to overcome perceived differentials in economic power. The first differential is between employers and employees. The second is between banks and their borrowers. The older notions of free and voluntary exchange are subordinate to the notion that the powerful are always at an unfair advantage and therefore must be reined in. The concept of freedom of contract is therefore emphatically rejected by progressives. There's no way to paper over the differences between these two perspectives, and as the next election comes ever closer, this nation faces a fork in the road. To the right, the "don't tread on me" call of the Tea Parties and the wealth and stability creating power of the classical liberalism of our founding. On the other fork, the tread on us all demands for more wealth-destroying redistribution from the Occupy Wall Street progressives. The blunt truth is that this nation can no longer afford to hew to the progressive agenda on either matters of public finance or private arrangements. The progressive agenda shrinks the size of the stock of financial wealth by a sustained program of ill-advised regulation of the economic engine. It imposes extensive and counterproductive programs of redistribution that cannot be supported by a stagnant economy and a shrinking productive wealth base. And as that base gets smaller, the demand for a stronger safety net induces yet another round of redistribution. This, in turn, exerts greater negative pressures on production levels. And the downward spiral continues.